The passage that we're looking at this week includes many. There's a number of times when we look at the scripture, and it's very obvious that the lectionary creators kind of put them together. They each need to have their own kind of time, but we have them shrunk. That's not the case with the scriptures we're looking at this morning. These are three different stories, but Matthew very definitely puts them together. Now, whether they happen chronologically, it really doesn't matter because they connect thematically, and that's what I think the writer of Matthew is trying to talk to us about. First, we get the calling of Matthew the tax collector, and then we get the Pharisees saying, "Why do you even spend time with these people?" Then the fourth story is the woman with a hemorrhage that's lasted for 12 years. And the final story is the raising of the little girl. In Luke, we hear that the father's name is Jairus, but we don't hear that in Matthew. All of these stories are connected, and they're connected by a simple process of Jesus looking to see who's not included and welcoming them back. Every story has an undertone of being on the outside. Matthew, as the tax collector, very definitely. He was considered a collaborator. He worked with Rome. And part of the reason that the tax collectors were so vilified is because they were allowed by law to increase the tax amount, and that margin was where they made their money. Now, obviously, that was rife for exploitation. So the people did not trust the tax collectors. They were agents of an enemy government who was there to exploit them. The fact that Jesus stopped and said, "Come on, follow me," and Matthew did, left everything behind, we're told, and got up and followed. That's strange. That's weird. Would that happen? Don't know. I can't see it happening, though, with people today. The next story, of course, is the Pharisees looking at all the people that Jesus is having dinner with. He's gone to Matthew's house now, so basically he's crossed into enemy territory as far as the culture is concerned. And he's now eating with tax collectors and prostitutes and people who had skin diseases, which is a euphemism for leprosy, and a whole host of other things. And the Pharisees, who kind of represent the proper way of doing things, they're looking at him and talking to his followers and like, what's with this guy? Why is he constantly going outside social norms? You know, the rules are the rules are the rules. They work for all of us. Why is he always breaking them? And of course, Jesus overhears this because how can he not? And he says, you know what? I didn't come for the people who haven't got growth needed or haven't got pains that they need to have tended to. In the indigenous scripture that I'm reading, the language is more like, I came for the people who needed medicine, which is a very indigenous kind of terminology for a whole host of things. Not necessarily physical medicine, although that could be included, but it includes spiritual, cultural, it's welcoming, it's inclusion, your basic DEI kind of stuff. And Jesus said, that's who I came for. I didn't come for the people such as you who think they have the heart of God, and why would they need to learn anything more? That's the kind of underscoring of the language that we don't hear. And then we have the woman who had been hemorrhaging. Again, another social outcast in a culture where bleeding was considered dirty, to be unsanitary. She would not have been welcome into homes, into the synagogues, definitely not the temple, anywhere else. She was in the community, in the crowd, and others around her, if they noticed her, and they would have said something, would have kind of pushed her aside. What are you doing here? This is for the good people of town, not the people who are unclean. And Jesus saw her. She touched his cloak anyway. Didn't ask for permission, just kind of barged in there because her state of being, her desperation, her belief, her faith, whatever you want to call it, said, I'm going to do something about this now and not wait until I'm noticed. But Jesus did notice and turned to her, and he called her daughter. I don't call very many people daughter, probably more than the average person for sure. But I know who my actual daughter is. And the daughter term means family, means someone close to your heart. And Jesus turned to her and said, daughter, you're welcome home. That's so significant on so many levels. And then finally, going with the church leader, the Pharisees who just told him that he was outside the bounds, one of their members came to him and said, okay, you know what? My daughter needs you. Can you come now, please? And Jesus was on his way, of course, when the woman touched him, but he continued on his way. And he got there, and the good traditional people who were doing their thing, because mourners, especially if you were in a wealthy place, wealthy family, mourners could be a paid profession, and people came to the house. They were expecting to get paid. That they were doing their job. They knew what culture expected of them. And Jesus said, you know what, it's not here ready for you to be here yet. This is not appropriate. And they laugh, of course, because, they of all people would have recognized death. But Jesus said, no, go away. This is not your time, not your place. So they left. And then, which I find is very significant in the story, after Jesus deals with, again, culture, he walks into the house and says, okay, come on. Just puts his hand out. Doesn't even give the words that we hear in Luke's version. So all of these are stories of mercy, of acceptance, of bringing people back inside. And they can't be dismissed as one-offs, because they're a continued line of different situations where Jesus is encountering people that culture and society have pushed to the margins. Whether they had blood taboos, whether it was death, which is another taboo, whether it was a tax collector, another taboo, physically unhealthy, prostitution. All of these were people that good society did not engage with. Even if the little girl had died, the people might have given the proper ritual reaction, but they would have avoided the family for a while they kind of got over what was going on, and they might not have dealt with them again in the way they had. But Jesus doesn't see any of that culture. In fact, when he's focused on it, he directly says, don't come to me with this. This is not significant at all. And he goes against the expectation, and he welcomes these outsiders back into community. Tells them they've got a road home. They're seen. They're no longer have to stay on the outskirts. I think one thing we have to take away as people also who are asked to be the feet and the hands of Jesus is that this is also our job. And how do we do that? Well, that becomes a bit of a challenge, because we're all highly aware of our cultural position. My cultural place is going to be different than someone else's cultural place, so I can get away with doing things that someone else might. I'll be judged differently. All of these things weigh on us as we're evaluating what we do. And the best I can come up with is actually a story of my daughter when she was young. We were part of a homeschool community, and she was, without realizing it, the social center of the group. And that was very, very obvious to the adults and to majority of the children. But you know who didn't know that? And that was my daughter. She somehow interpreted her ability to invite people in to the circle as being her on the outside. She had no perception that she was actually on the inside. And one of the reasons all the others went with it is because she was really their social leader. To this day, you talk to her about that, and she said, no, Mom, that's not how it was going on. But I watched it. I was there to see that. My daughter would see the newcomer, and she would physically remove herself from the middle of whatever activity was going on. Didn't matter where they were with things. She didn't kind of tell them to fold the proverbial page until she got back. She would get up and go and welcome these people, give them an orientation, tell them what's what, identify where the moms were, identify where the kids were, welcome them into their games. She was the one that brought people in constantly. And I find it very interesting that in the end, she's the one that felt that she was on the outside. And the thing is, she was my daughter. I recognize how wonderful she is anyway. I'm genetically programmed to see her as one of the great beings in life. But she was doing something that all of us are capable of doing. And that is recognizing the outsider. Because the reality is, her perception of the world is not that different from most people's perception. I, as the outsider, as her mother, might have seen certain things that she was doing, but she didn't experience it that way. She experienced being the outside so she could identify other outsiders. Every single one of us can relate to that particular emotion and feeling. So, follow the dots. If Jesus demonstrated what it was like to be welcoming people from the outside back on the path, back to family, back to cultural and social wholeness, back from the brink, everybody else who also has an experience of being an outsider can do that welcoming as well. It might not include miracles, it might not include standing up against social pressure, but every single one of us has the ability to be like Jesus in that day, to see who was not part of the circle and invite them in. We all have that commission. We all have that ministry. And we all are responsible to doing it. It's not as if Jesus did it because only leaders could. Jesus did it one-offs, not even everybody, just these one-off experiences to show how it can be done, how we can bring people back into the faith community, into a world where hope exists, where promise exists, where community, connection, value exists. We all have that as something that we can work towards, because all of us know what it feels like to be on the outside. And through Jesus, we can all learn how it feels like to be on the inside too.